Thank you very much for that warm welcome. I appreciated that. First of all, before I start, I must acknowledge that what I'm presenting today is the hard work of a lot of individuals. You mentioned Andrew Thomas. I couldn't miss that person. Recently retired, very, very influential in this space. We also had others which started this journey many years ago, Matthew Morrissey and Joe Despina. So these are names that you're probably all familiar with. Probably not so much my name because I've tended to be in a different space, but I thought it was interesting to present this information to you from a point of view of someone who looks at systems and abilities to do things rather than a water-sensitive urban design specialist. So I'm probably attacking it from a slightly different viewpoint than what many of you may be used to. The first thing we probably want to discuss, why. A lot of people will start off with how, what we're going to do, but I always think that the why is the most compelling discussion. What we found, and correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, which you always will, we want to raise the awareness of people to consider stormwater quality as part of the DNA of any development. Now, reading that again, the problem we have previously was that it was considered an afterthought. It was considered to be something that would be done as a nicety, perhaps, by some. And what we wanted to do was to raise that discussion to the forefront of people's minds. And the way to do that was triggered a little bit by this charge that we're going to be talking about. It also did another thing. It improved the affordability for the city of Onkaparinga to have that sort of facility available. And those are key drivers, if you like, in any constrained government funding arrangement that you have. You need to make sure you're spending the money wisely and maximising your income or revenue stream as much as you can. So to do that, we needed to think a little bit differently. We did the old ready, fire, aim trick in many ways. What we basically did was say, okay, what we're going to do is use a section of the Local Government Act that enables us to go forward and create a service charge. That service charge, I think, started in 2007, roughly. And it was originally a concept to enable us to have a vehicle to be able to recover a cost from developers in greenfields environments. The reason that was important, though, was, again, this is a conscious raising issue, but also it was very maintenance focused at that time. As you can see on the graph there, and I'll just point to that down further as I go through this slide, you'll see why that graph is there. In 2011, we changed to a more capital focus. So that's where we started about $6,700 per hectare. Now that was actually calculated on impervious area. You may be thinking, well, that's in line with everyone else's comments, and rightfully so. But we found that that was difficult at times because there was always the argument between the developer and the council as, okay, I'm measuring at 65%, you're measuring at 55%, let's have an argument about that. We thought one of the key elements of this, we wanted some predictability from the developer's point of view. We didn't want to be sitting down at a table and having an argument about something that should be really upfront as far as the developer is concerned. So we then increased the price to also get more traction and changed it into a total area of the subdivision. Now later on I'll go through a worked example of how that works, but we actually found it easier to communicate with people saying, okay, if you've got 7 hectares, of that 7 hectares, you get charged a certain rate per hectare, and that is your stormwater quality management fee. That makes it more predictable from a developer's point of view. However, we must make sure that whenever we do this sort of thing that we communicate well with the people who are at the other end. And I think that's a work on for us at the moment. We need to make sure the developer is very much aware of what's happening at the front end. As you can see, it was quite a significant jump from the $6,700 to around about $15,000 worth. Why were we able to justify that? Well, one thing we found was that the original price was enabling people to tokenise the stormwater quality. The $6,700 figure, roughly speaking, enabled people to just say, well, okay, I'll just give you a cheque, rather than thinking seriously about how they can actually implement stormwater quality. We also found out it wasn't covering the cost. There was too much of a differential between the real cost of providing that service than what we were actually charging. So we went to council and said, okay, in 2014, we're going to go from a CPI of 4%, we're going to go and go from $6,700 to 17,000. The problem with going from that to that was that we really needed a fight, and there was some lively discussions before we got to council to justify it. So we had to have an ironclad case to promote that. We needed to have a real life worked example to actually use, and that's what we did to basically go from $6,700 to 17,000, and we needed that to be able to get through the chamber. We also needed to get that through our management process as well. I might be one of the few who goes under time today, so you'll have to. When we talk about these schemes, and quite often we talk about the general rules, we often forget to think about how we're going to apply that and what are the exceptions. And Birgit mentioned a few of those where there's sites where, hey, water quality is just going to be nigh impossible to achieve. This example here I've got up on the right-hand side, without giving away, because it is a current subdivision. It was the old grass slide that come down the hill on Main South Road. So you can imagine the slope on that's about 20% in most places. So it's got a fair bit of grade in it. Not an ideal site for developing a stormwater quality solution. We also have midway through the allotment a creek line, which is shown there with the flooding turned on. And then we have this all at the sweet spot, the equipment this area here. That area there is what the developer, of course, wants to start on, because it means least startup costs. He then has a very quick return on his money. He's able to get going and then fund the balance of his development. And guess where all the stormwater quality would need to go? Guess where he would get the least yield? That land there he wants to start with. So to get this process from being deadlocked, we did some working out on this. So for example, what we've done, we've had a look at them, and you probably all had this situation where you get a subdivision and it's staged over about X amount of stages. And as a result of that, it becomes very difficult at the end of the day to say, well, this stage owes me $6,000, this one owes me $10,000. We said, instead of that, we'll take the entire area, remember our rule there, apply our rules as far as how much per hectare, and then work out what our rebate would be over the entire subdivision. So there was a flexibility around this, and this is one of the important things. If you're setting these sort of charges in place, make sure you have subject to negotiation, because there are going to be circumstances we will not be able to cover with a document, a policy document. You'll need to have some flexibility there. So how did this work? To get our rebate on calculation, we basically looked at our goal, and you can see along the bottom line there, the more shaded one, we've got a goal percentage of 70% of gross pollutant, 80% of suspended solids, 45 and 45 again of phosphorus. And so what we do, we measure by using a music model to see what are they actually going to achieve by their work. In this particular case, the developer was proposing to put a couple of GPTs in. So that was a win, that was good. But it also still left a lot of phosphorus and nitrogen there. So you can see what we did, we done, this is a make-believe, by the way, so if anyone's looking at this and saying that's not quite right, I believe you. So we basically got figures of 60, 40, 30 and 30. So what we have is a formula which tells us how to calculate the entire rebate, and in this case here it's 67%. So that means that they get a $80,000 worth of reward for putting in 2 GPTs, but we still have to fund $40,000. So they basically pay us the $40,000. So what that means is that we get some money into the kitty to actually address downstream the issues, rather than trying to squeeze on some very unideal land a water quality treatment. And that's a far preferable situation than having, as we've seen in some cases, and that's probably my next slide there, the lessons learnt, is that when we look at the lessons learnt, in many cases we're seeing we had some really undesirable solutions in some cases where people just put a token, a retaining area, a bit of vegetation, very difficult for us to maintain. You get little pockets of these, the maintenance people are not happy. Generally they don't really last that well because they take a lot of effort to keep going, and as a result of that they tend to drop off the maintenance regime, and as a result of that they end up not producing the function that they originally had. So what we've learned here is that we needed to engage early with developers. There's no good going in there and say, surprise, surprise, I want $117,000 from you. Today, that's probably not going to really be a nice thing to say. We also found we needed to advocate for larger, more maintainable solutions. And in some cases, that meant we say, okay, we accept that you will not be able to achieve everything you need to on that subdivision. Therefore, we will actually build something better downstream or interrupt that flow some other way. And also set clear expectations. Some of the discussions, I see Jude in the area here, we quite often have discussions, how do we apply this? We need to set the clear expectation across the entire council group, including the development team, the technical services, the engineering team, and the asset planner in the water resources area. The other thing we've also recognised as a lesson that we need to learn is that ensure we've got a good maintenance regime. These tools that we have of retention basins and biofilters, they don't last forever. They do need maintenance, and as a result of that, you can actually have the best laid plans and end up with something that just doesn't work very quickly if you don't have a maintenance regime in there. So that's one of the areas we really need to work on, and to get the dollars right. The dollars are very important because without that, you're not really raising the seriousness of the discussion. Two, you're not doing your council any good because you're putting them in the hole, as it were, rather than actually giving them a revenue stream. You're actually creating an expectation which is higher than what you can deliver. And when you do that, you know what happens. Eventually, you have to deliver that from the funds given to you by the ratepayer. Well, I suppose the next steps are how do we address the legislative challenges? I believe that there's a whole lot of things happening at the moment, and I'm not an expert in this area and probably shouldn't get into it too much. But we're definitely going to provide better information to our developers. We're going to definitely resolve our maintenance issue, but probably as a little bit of a teaser for a future presentation, complete our cost-benefit analysis tool project. Now, Andrew started that off, and I'll just give you a bit of an idea, and Andy, I appreciate what you said earlier about the wow factor, to get the people buying into these things. How do we do that? This slide might give you an idea. We looked at the cost benefits of water quality, the runoff attenuation, the health and medical costs, and health life expectancy. That was an amazing result, 488,000. This is done by research which is quite well disciplined. It's the resources used are actual resources. It's not a pie in the sky thing. And also you can see that there's a whole lot of benefits. And what it meant is people then, instead of not going for a walk, would walk down your lovely boulevard and get some exercise. That exercise led to them going less frequently to McDonald's or whatever it might be. That exercise meant they were less likely to go and need some further treatment on a medical condition. Those factors were put into here based on a really sound research. And I think it's quite interesting that when you looked at that, I was astounded that the 488,000, and remember, these are real people we're dealing with. This is not just numbers. This is people's health that we can actually improve by putting a scheme together that addresses this. And this is a good outcome from that. And I think it's going to be one of those that probably as the tool gets developed and circulated around, that people are going to find really beneficial to tick the boxes at least with their elected members and also the developers, because to me, that is a major, major coup for that particular issue. We quite often talk in terms of tonnes of reduction of materials. This talks in terms of the emotional, the gut feel, the health of people. So that's probably all I can really say at the moment, and please be gentle with your questions. I'm not an expert in the area, or I might have to refer to Andrew or others to answer those questions. So thank you very much for your attention, and hopefully it's been of some information to you.